also, like, I put a little flashlight behind me.
Oh, there you go. I was about to say,
See?
that thing looks like really cool.
Yeah.
Okay, it looks like we're live, Deanna.
We are live. We are live. Okay. So now we're gonna. I'm gonna share that to my Facebook page.
And then if I go to
All right.
Unity right now, can I share it on mine as well?
Yes, you can.
Let me do that real quick. And so are people going to be popping in on the Zoom or watching or on Instagram or on Facebook?
They're watching on Facebook and Zoom, but
Oh, okay.
everybody who comes into Zoom is automatically muted across the board.
Okay.
Okay.
All right. Let me pull up Unity real quick.
And then I kind of watch it just to see if there are any questions.
I see.
Although we haven't really done Q&A at all, so I don't know that anybody would think to do that. Da 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 da.
I don't see the post yet on there, so it's probably still loading up there.
I just shared it to my page.
Oh, okay. So I can share it from your page. I went to the Unity.
Yes, you can. You can share it from my page for sure. Hi, Annie. Whoops.
It's just your name, right? Deanna Joseph?
Uh-huh. You know what? I will tag you. There
we go.
See if I can tag you. Not
yeah, I'm much better with Instagram than I am with Facebook for sure. Here we go. All right, I got it.
You did it. Okay, excellent. So many moving parts. So many moving parts.
Alrighty, well, I'm ready whenever.
Okay, Adam, if you could put it on gallery view. Annie, why don't you turn off your video for right now, okay? Thank you, darling. All right, it is 1 p.m. on Wednesday, and we are here to light up the joy and light up the good so that we're living the lessons. My guest today is co-founder and owner of 0 Point Athletics, Taylor Fakas. He is a structural body worker, a CHEK holistic lifestyle coach, and a biomechanics specialist. You heard that right. With over 10 years of experience working with athletes, physical therapists, and orthopedic surgeons, Taylor has created his Divergent Therapeutics practice as a system for restoring proper breathing and movement mechanics. People come to see Taylor for help because they've tried everything else and they were not getting results. Like, those are my words. I'm speaking from experience. And I can only say it's because he understands the multidimensionality of the body and how all these moving parts work together. So welcome, Taylor. Hi, it's so good to have you here.
Thank you very much. I'm excited to be here and share some time and information and just some presence with you guys.
I am so excited too, because we're going to be talking about 0 point energy. And this is a term I first heard, I'd say back in the early 2000s. And I thought it was just a spiritual term. But then when I heard you talking about it, you were applying it to the entire body system. And so I would just love to hear about how that works, like seeing it as a whole being experience.
Yeah, for sure. So there's a couple different jumping off points, and that's one of the cool things with the idea of the 0 point idea or process or law of the universe, if you want to call it that, because it's one of those things where, because you're in a state of perfect equilibrium, and there is no polarization, you can go anywhere you want. The possibilities are infinite. And that's why the kind of our tagline is unlock your infinite potential, right? So there's a lot of different lenses through which you can look at the term 0 point energy, because like you said, there's kind of the spiritual esoteric way of looking at it. There's the actual quantum physics way of looking at it. And we're going to kind of get into all of these. There's, many different interpretations of that. There's the technological version of that, because there's 0 point energy devices that can actually create energy from the 0 point field, is what they call it, and we'll kind of get into that too. So there's a lot of different ways of looking at it, and that's one of the things that I think is beautiful about it. And Jaron is actually the one who came up with that name for it. When we were thinking about, all right, we're going to open a gym and a holistic healing center. What should we call it? And he sent me a text one day. He's like, what if we called it 0 point athletics? And I was like, dude, that's it. You 100%, like you nailed it. And so, it's one of those things where there's so many different contexts for it that it can be used as a tool to affect many different areas of your life. And so when it comes to 0 point energy from a technological standpoint, all the way up to the spiritual esoteric version of it, it's something that you can kind of apply as a concept or a principle in almost anything that you do. And it really just depends on what pair of glasses that you're wearing. So we can kind of break it up and into these different subcategories and talk about 0 point energy. But what I think most people are probably the least familiar with is the physics component of it. There's a lot of new age and spiritual kind of understanding around that there is this infinite source of vitality and energy and life force, and that can be equated with, intelligent infinity or God or the creator. And I believe all that's true, and that's why it's such a cool name too, because that's still like encoded inside of it, right? And that's why the symbol for 0 point is a Merkaba, which is a piece of geometry, right? So the geometry of space and space-time is really how we came to the understanding of what 0 point energy is and how it functions. So we can get into that a little bit. So if I lose you at all, or if I go off on tangents, I'm going to ask you for a little help to reel me back in, because this is one of those things where it's almost like, hey, let's have a conversation about describing God. It's almost ineffable, right? It's like, so there's all these different perspectives, and I get so excited and stuff, I can go in a couple different directions. But so if I get off on a tangent, just bring me back on track. But we'll start kind of with the physics part, because I think it's the least understood. And it's something that's really powerful when you're able to actually conceptualize it in your mind, and then use that idea, that imagining, to embody it in physical reality, in your physical body and in this dimension, right?
Okay.
So the idea of 0 point energy really originated from the idea of the ether. So the idea of ether has been around forever, way back in Ayurvedic medicine. There's a lot of really ancient cultures that would say, well, there's this element that isn't earth, wind, water, and fire. Like there's some other thing happening. It's the spirit. There's this conscious spark. And that kind of like led into the idea, well, there must be this psychic substance or something that's connecting all of us that we are not really able to perceive, at least today, like they were back then. And the way that I usually explain this is, it's like, if you want to tune into subtler levels of energy, or energies that require a more finely tuned instrument, right? So like if we were going to use a radio for an example, and you really want to listen to 10:50 a.m. radio, because that's where the 0 Point Health Show is. You really want to listen to 10:50 a.m. radio, and you're at 10:49 AM radio, you're probably not going to get the clearest, signal. You're not going to be able to like really receive that, because there's too much interference. There's not enough coherence. Well, we live in a culture and a society now that's just so intense, so fast paced, and there's so much information, whether it's electromagnetic information, just literally, words, stories, learning about what's going on in the world the whole time, and a lot more stress. Our radio receiver, which is our body, has having a harder time picking up those subtler sensations, especially because most ancient traditions that really got into this, and this will be interesting depending on how far down this rabbit hole we go, who really got into this, all these practices were about tuning the instrument of your body, meditation, yoga, breath work. It was about putting you in a state where you could act as a better transmitter and receiver for that ether or that energy that is so subtle that most of us aren't currently aware of it. So it really kind of originates from that idea of the ether. And if you want to interject at any point, please feel free to interrupt me. So that's been around for a really long time. And
Okay.
oh, go ahead. Did you want to say something?
No, I'm riding along
All right,
this
cool,
wave
cool,
with
cool.
you, Taylor.
Cool. So that idea is ancient, right? And then
Okay.
when real modern physics was born, not Newtonian physics. Newtonian physics has now been proven really to not really be true outside of being on this planet, right? We have certain laws, physical laws that are only really apparent on planet Earth. You know, for every action, there's an equal and opposite reaction, and the theory of gravity that Newton created, and all those things work really well when you're looking at humans and animals and you're on planet Earth. But when you get down to the infinitely large and the infinitely small, which is really the leap from Newtonian to quantum physics, all that kind of falls apart. And so there was like a couple years there where people were like, do we even know anything anymore? Because when we get down to like, you know, quarks and bosons and all these tiny particles, which are more of a quantum physics thing, they don't follow Newtonian laws of physics. So they're like, okay, well, if we're trying to describe the physical world, and the goal of physics has always been to have a unified theory, an answer for everything, right? To be able to connect all the dots. Well, if Newton's physics makes sense when an apple falls from a tree, that's great. But if you look at a galaxy or a subatomic particle and it is not following those same rules, then that's not a unified theory. It's not universal, right? So that kind of led into the research behind quantum physics. And the guy that really spearheaded that, I'm sure everybody has heard his name before, was Einstein. Einstein started looking at the theory of relativity and light and like trying to describe gravity better than Newton did, and taking it a step further. Well, where it gets kind of interesting, and this is where there's a little bit of conspiracy around this, which I won't really get too much into that, is Einstein, as well as who was it? Bohm, David Bohm, which was another really, really prominent physicist at the time. They came up with this idea that there has to be an ether. There has to be some substance that is literally physically connecting us, that allows us to transmit and receive information in a way and at a rate that we don't usually think possible or can comprehend. So the way that I help explain this in layman's terms is, if you're underwater, sound waves travel much farther than they do when you're not underwater, when you're surrounded by air, right? And that's because water, the molecules are closer together. So when a water molecule vibrates, it's closer to the one that's next to it. That one vibrates and it carries the vibration, the sound frequency longer, right?
Mm-hmm.
Well, that makes a lot of sense. That's simple, right? Well, that's sound. That's creating sound. Well, thoughts and feelings are more subtle vibrations, and the ether is a more subtle substance that we're connected through than water is, right?
Mm-hmm.
And because the ether is so small and also so packed with energy, it does not follow the normal laws of space-time. And so that idea of the ether started a lot of research. I mean, it got the government looking into mind control stuff and remote viewing and like all these crazy like new technologies and different ways of thinking opened up, because it's like, okay, well, if there is some field that's everywhere and it doesn't follow the law of space and time and it's full of energy. I mean, 1 cubic centimeter of empty space, which is the ether, and I'll explain that in a minute, but 1 cubic centimeter of empty space could power the entire planet for over 10,000 years if we could harness the energy in that space, right?
Okay. All right. So let me ask this. So is the ether like another term for like the divine mind or source energy?
I would say yes, that's an accurate description of it. And that's part of the reason why when Bohm and Einstein first put this out there, they were massively ridiculed. And this is a pattern. It's really cool because if you just go through the history of polymaths and physicists, every time someone had this idea that was going to shatter the paradigm that was there at the time and shift the worldview, they were burned at the stake. They were ostracized. They were shunned because it just challenged what people thought they knew so much. So when
Okay.
Bohm and Einstein put this paper out, they actually published a paper saying there has to be an ether. That's the only way this works. We don't know what it is, where it is, but there's something there. And he got a ton of crap for it. And so they actually like redacted the paper. He said, you know what, actually, I think I was wrong. You know, maybe it doesn't make a whole lot of sense. Well, there's this really interesting other pattern that shows up with physicists and geniuses, where as they get older, they usually start getting a lot more connected with their work and making a lot more progress with unifying things just because they have more experience working with it. And
Okay.
so on Einstein's like deathbed, he wanted to republish that paper. He said, there is an ether. I was right all along. It's connecting all of us. It explains spooky action at a spooky action at a distance, which I can explain that if you want. And all these things, all the quantum stuff we don't understand, the ether can explain it. Well, it still didn't get published and it still didn't get put out because they said, oh, well, he's old and crazy now. That's what it is. He's
Okay.
just old and crazy. And interestingly
Okay.
enough, I think it was Donald Trump's dad purchased that paper and
Oh,
held on to it until 2013. So you can actually look this up. Einstein published a paper on the ether in 2013. And since then, we've now been able to prove the existence of it.
okay. Okay. So I have a question for you then about the ether, this original substance, what some of us, like in Unity, might call source energy, the divine mind. Okay, so this was for my own study of 0 point energy. I basically defined it, and this is probably in kindergarten terms, but it's a space between a void of pure potential and creation. It's a space where things become possible. And what happened, I finally started like really wondering about this was when I had hurt my back and I came to see you because the physical therapy wasn't helping me. And you said, we have to get your body back to a state of 0 point so that healing then becomes possible. And you said it was like a space of neutrality. And so I find it very interesting, like our body needs to be in 0 point, that neutrality, but then also our mind, our way of thinking, that would all need to be like, first we need to get into like a neutral space to be able to access something bigger. I mean, what are your
Yeah.
thoughts on that?
Yeah, no, you beautifully described that. That was very well said. And so, the thing is that space that you described, where the infinite potential is, the reason why the potential is infinite is because space is really not the best word to describe it. And the reason is because when you say space, people think nothing. They think empty space, right? So if you go back to, any physics or science class you ever took in school, you've been told 99.99999% of everything is empty space. It's just nothing. Like, I think it's hilarious that people didn't question that right off the bat, that like only 0.0001% of anything is anything. But that quote unquote empty space would be more accurately described as the ether, because the ether is a force and an energy. And if you look at space, it has unbelievable amounts of electromagnetic energy that's stored within it. It's just something that our senses can't directly perceive. But with the technological advancements that we've had in the last probably 30 years, and if you guys really want to dive deep into this and get into it, definitely check out the Resonance Foundation and Nassim Haramein and Robert Edward Grant's work. I can send Deanna some links and maybe she can post them in the video or something if you guys want to check them out, because it's like a 16-week course on this type of stuff. And it really dives deep and gets into a lot of the details and things like that. But the vacuum of space-time being packed full full of energy is a total paradigm shift, because if there's a bunch of empty space between you and me right now, Deanna, then we're not in contact with each other, right? Like there is a separation. There's an idea of separation between us, right? But if the reality is, which I believe there is, and there's quite a few peer-reviewed published papers that believe that this is the case now, as well as top physicists, that the ether really could most accurately be described as a superfluid crystal matrix that allows energy and information to be transmitted and received beyond space and time. So that's like, I mean, some of the work that you do with the Akashic records, I mean, you have a better understanding of the ether than I do, because you can experience it, like you tap into it, right? So it's like an experienced meditator or someone that has some of the gifts that you have. It's like maybe they don't know the 0 point word or this or that for it, but they're working with it because it is an aspect of everything, right? And it's almost analogous to God, right? It's that omniscient, infinite intelligence, and it has something that's really unique, and it's an self-organizing pattern. It always organizes itself in the most energy efficient pattern. Nature does what works, and then it repeats it, the path of least resistance. And that all comes down to spirals, spin, torque, toruses, radiation, compression, those things where there's opposition happening in two directions. If you just look at the planet, I mean, it's at every single scale. Everything on the northern part of the equator spins in the opposite direction as everything on the southern part of the equator. So what magical force is doing that? It's the electromagnetic ether that we are not directly perceiving. And so you brought up, start having a 0 point, a state of neutrality, right? Well, the way that I also describe it, because you can ask me on 20 different days and I'll describe 0 point in 20 different ways. But the way that I describe it sometimes is it's almost like the Trinity. So if you have yin over here and yang over here, or positive and negative, we experience most of our life going through cycles between those two things, because it's polarity. That's how the third dimension works from our understanding at our level of consciousness, right? Well, there is a point right in the middle, a balance point of that scale, the 0 point, the eye of the storm, whatever that, whatever you have to use to visualize it. Well, if you are in that place of neutrality, then you're not getting pulled to the left or pulled to the right. You're not being pulled into yin, pulled into yang. So you can make a very conscious and intentional decision on the direction that you want to move in. And that ties into your body. So if you can't get to a state of neutrality first, then you can't initiate going into a state of asymmetricality or non-neutrality, like walking, or, if you move at all. I'm not neutral right now. Okay, maybe this is pretty close to neutral. So we have to be able to have that starting point, that 0 point, that state of neutrality as a reference. That's our homeostasis. That's our balance point. And then we have to be able to swing between yin and yang while actually passing through that state of neutrality. It's called the transitional zone. So you have to be able to experience yin, you have to be able to experience yang, you have to experience your left leg, you have to experience your right leg, but you also have to know where the middle is. Otherwise, you don't know how far you are to the right or how far you are to the left, because you lose the third point of reference, which is that 0 point. So giving someone an experience of that gives them a level of independence and freedom, because they're no longer being pulled in a direction. They're in a state of clarity and faith. They're not afraid. They're not going out and chasing something. They're not running away from something. So you can make a very clear, conscious, and intentional decision. It gives you altitude. It allows you to see where you want to go more. So that's kind of the body component of 0 point for sure.
Okay. So let me ask you this. I was on the phone with someone a few days ago, and she told me, like, she was really angry at someone and she could not forgive this person. No matter what, she was not going to forgive this person. And like, she really used some very strong words with her feelings. Like, it was very apparent that there's a big issue around this, like some rage. And so that would not be in a 0 point. Okay. And so what I'm wondering then, so for any of us, it's getting out of that extreme emotion into a neutral zone, so then we can decide there from neutrality.
Mhm.
I need to forgive. It's time to let go. Like, is that it? Is that
Yeah,
the
for
going into
sure.
the neutral zone?
Yeah, for sure. So
The 0 point zone?
again, using the idea of polarity or magnets, if it makes it simpler, is a good illustration. So let's say that you said something to me, or we had an interaction that gave me a charge, right? Because just think of this like electricity, right? Polarity, electricity, magnets, magnetism, EMF. So you say something that gives me a charge, and it could be positive or negative, right? So if you
Mhm.
say, Taylor, I love you so much, you're the most amazing person I've ever met, blah 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 blah, and okay, oh wow, really positively polarized, I feel like really good. And then, if you said something that would be really hurtful or not life affirming to me, especially if it came from you, because I hold you in very high regard, I'd be like, Deanna doesn't love me, I'm not good. So, it'd send me the other way, right?
Uh-huh.
So if you think of that as a positive magnet being over here and a negative magnet being over here, you either sent me towards the positive magnet or the negative magnet, right?
Yeah.
And at that point in the middle, there is no polarization. If there was a third magnet and it was in the perfect distance between a negative and a positive one, it would float right there. It wouldn't be pulled in either direction, right? So that gives you a level of clarity on how you want to express and interact that you wouldn't have if you were either being pulled towards or pushed away. So again, thinking of a magnet, if you said something that was really negative or made me feel really negative and I got negatively polarized, what that's
Mhm.
really doing is it's reflecting back to me my own negative beliefs about myself, my own shadow, because otherwise I wouldn't have got upset by it. I'd still be in the 0 point, right?
Mhm.
So if you shared an experience with me and I had a negative reaction to it, the reaction is really to my own negative beliefs about myself. So if I associate you with being negative, and then I have a belief about myself that's negative, well, two negative magnets, two negatively polarized magnets don't attract each other, they repel each other, right? And it's the
Mhm.
same thing on the other spectrum, right? So
Okay.
looking at it from that standpoint, you have to really try to think about, okay, well, am I already in a state of polarity? Am I already charged? Am I going into this conversation defensive or trying to gain something, trying to get someone to do what I want? Or am I going in with emotional equanimity and presence and showing up exactly as I am in my truth to share space with somebody? Because the beautiful part is when you meet someone who's like that, and I'm not like that. I got a lot of work to do before I'm like that, but I have met people like that. It depolarizes you immediately. And most people have had an experience like this before, where it's like you're really upset and just the right person just the right thing, right? or
Mhm.
or you're really up high and you're in this manic kind of like super super positive state, and then someone actually has to bring you back down to earth a little bit because you're not seeing clearly. Your head's
Mhm.
too up in the clouds or your head's buried too down in the dirt, right? So it all
Mhm.
comes down to this idea of balance. And when you're in a state of balance, which is transitional, you're supposed to swing from left to right. The sun comes up and the sun goes down. There is supposed to be
Mhm.
seasons. But if you can't transition through that 0 point, at least sometimes, you never know where your perceived center is physically, emotionally. You have no reference for what normal is without
Mhm.
being pulled by a situation or a person or something like that. So
Mhm.
many of us from a very early age become polarized from experiences with our family, at school, whatever. And we get attached, we get stuck over there because there's such a strong pull, because we're identified with it and we're moving in that direction. So
Okay.
if that's where your perceived center is, so if this is negative, this is positive, and this is the 0 point, but your perceived 0 point is here, and you think that being negatively polarized is normal,
Mhm.
then your reaction patterns, being defensive, taking things personally, not believing in yourself, that's just your normal, because you've
Mhm.
never experienced the 0 point. You've never transitioned to the other
Mhm.
side. So you need to have, let me see if I nail this sentence. Um, it's instantaneous, oscillating interchange, is how Walter Russell would describe it. And that's another name you might want to remember if you want to go deep into this, because we're just scratching the surface. But everything should just swing smoothly from left to right. But there should be this little point of transition where you're able to glean that balanced equanimity, that insight. So when you are swinging left or right, you really know how far left or right you want to go.
And like I am noticing, like, let's just bring up, the pandemic. Okay. So I've noticed there's a lot of like, it's real extreme. Okay. What people are sharing, what they're feeling, it's really extreme. And I first felt that myself the night that here in the Inland Empire, it was announced for Southern California that there was officially a pandemic and we were asked to start staying at home. And for a minute, I felt the fear. I felt the tingling. I felt like I went out of my body a little bit. I was just sitting there. My husband even looks at me and says, "Are you okay?" And I was like, I will be. But I have to sit with this for a minute, right? And get back into my body. But that is like the extremes I'm noticing. Like all you have to do is go on social media. You see everybody's extremities, basically. And if we're in the extreme, we don't know we're in the extreme, right? We just think that's how it is. And really just feeling fear would be the only indicator that something's not right, right? So like, what are your thoughts around that? Like getting into 0 point, even when something like this is going on in our lives?
Yeah, so this kind of ties in with the meditation that we did on Sunday. And, just to build a little bit off of what you said is, and I want to be really precise with my speech here, because this is a very polarizing situation, right? So again, just using that same analogy, let's say that, you have a scale and there's the 0 in the middle, the 0 point, right? And there's 1 through 10 positive, 1 through 10 negative, right? And let's say
But let me just say real quick, the 1 through 10 positive doesn't mean the right choice. The 1 through 10 negative doesn't mean the wrong choice, right? It's just two extremes.
Yes, exactly, right?
Okay.
And see, the thing is, yeah, that's correct, right? So let's say, there's a scale from 1 to 10 in both directions and it starts at 0 in the middle. So let's say the spectrum for the emotional experiences that the average person would have was between a 5 and a 5 in either direction, right? So that was kind of the known space, and their perceived center was somewhere between 1 and 5 on either one of those sides on any given day, right? Well, when you create a massive increase in polarization, then that scale that we thought topped out at 5 just went to 10 in both directions, right? So when there is a situation, an emotion, an experience that has that much polarization, that much charge in it, it's one of those things that becomes highly controversial, and it ungrounds people. If you thought that the top of the container, the peak was here at 5, and then all of a sudden you experience it 8, 9, or 10, you're in completely uncharted territory. And so it's not even in the spectrum of the level of fear that most of us have experienced before,
Right.
It's this invisible enemy. It's completely changing the economy and this, that, whatever. It's that's why it's a novel virus. This is a novel situation. So we didn't just swing one way or the other way. We increased the length of the pendulum. We increased the spectrum, the octaves that are available for us because of the intensity of this. Right? So tying that back in with your question, how do we find that 0 point in such a highly polarized environment? Because it's one of those things where now it's like, there's not even just the fear of getting sick. There's the fear of what people will think about your beliefs about this thing. There's fear about what you should say or what you shouldn't say. There's fear about if we should be having church or if we shouldn't be having church, or nobody really knows what's right or wrong. And right or wrong can be very relative, but like the belief system around what we thought was right or wrong has been kind of destabilized at this point, right? So just to come full circle, for me, this is me personally, I'm a very analytical person, and I have a much easier time with information than I do with feelings. So if I have good information, that will help me regulate my feelings better, because it gives me that feeling of safety and security. It brings me more back to my 0 point, because your 0 point is different than mine, because we're life experiences and, you know, all this other stuff, right? If I was going to ask you what makes you feel completely grounded and centered, it might be different than what would make me feel completely grounded and centered, right? So in the meditation, if you guys didn't catch it on Sunday, and I'll try to wrap this up quick because I know we're going over our time a little bit here, was to essentially look at this situation and this life force, this being, if you want to call it that, this virus, as a form of intelligence, as an aspect and expression of intelligent infinity, and to try to open a channel of communication with it, to try to interact with it, because we're afraid of what we don't know. And if you could sit down and have a conversation with the coronavirus every day, you would probably be a little bit less afraid, because you would start to have a relationship with it, right? So that at the end of the meditation, I said, hey, there's a couple other components and some things I'd like to share that could help you have a healthier interaction with this. And I was going to save it for today to try to get more people to tune in. So to try to get us out of such a highly polarized state, you usually have to give someone either a different perspective or a different level of security or control, right? Because if you feel like you have some security and some control and some good information, you're not going to react as polarizing as someone who doesn't have that, right? So, you know, some very simple things that have been helping me and the information I've been sharing, and I can send links and all that too, because I don't want to go way over our time limit, is vitamin A, vitamin D, and vitamin C. Those 3 vitamins with the right dosage combined together can provide incredible protection from the coronavirus for people. So it's like, if you are experiencing a high polarization of fear, you're experiencing a lot of fear about this, you might be even too afraid to sit down and try to communicate with it, because it's almost like talking to the devil, right? Or like trying to summon a demon. You know, if you want to like tone that down a little bit, what helped me, I was like, oh, well, if I'm taking vitamin A, C, and D, I'm getting sunlight, and I'm doing a lot of the other things that you can do, I know that this isn't really a threat to me personally. So I can let go of my at least personal fear around my health, not necessarily business and other things, but it took it down a notch. You know, instead of being at an 8, maybe now you're at a 5. And maybe now that can open a doorway where you can start to build a relationship with the idea of the experience that's happening, because we play a role in co-creating that. And, you know, we could talk for a full hour just on that with, you know, meditations and magnetism and thoughts and all that stuff.
Oh, yeah.
Just take that information, guys, take information in, and then check in with your feeling state. Is it swinging you to the left or to the right? Which direction do you want it to swing you in? Is it bringing you closer to center or farther away? You know, if you have an agenda, you might want to get even more polarized. If the most important thing in the world to you right now is reopening your business, maybe, you know, you want to polarize yourself with as much anger and fear as possible to go do something. Is that what I would do? Is that what I would recommend? No, but every individual has the right to make that decision for what's best for them. But you don't know what's best for you unless you have a reference. And that 0 point, in my opinion, comes from letting go of the fear and opening a doorway of communication, so you can understand and have a greater level of knowing what's going on.
And be more of our centered self. More of our centered self. Taylor, that was so much good information today. So vitamin A, C, and D, not B?
Well, there's a lot of different ways to look at this.
I like vitamin B.
Yeah. So if you're cool with talking a little longer, we can go as long as you want. So just tell me to shut up.
Well, let's just take like another 2 minutes.
Okay, cool. So there's a lot of stuff that you can do, guys. But vitamin A, C, and D are the cheapest and most widely available for most people. And in the research that's been done, what's really going on is when you get infected with the virus is really not what hurts you or causes any damage. That's why there's so many people that are asymptomatic. You know, they have a little dry cough for a couple days, maybe their energy is low. They don't even know they had it and they're already over it, right? So then what is the difference between that person and anyone else? Well, the media is going to say they have pre-existing health conditions. Definitely truth to that, for sure. If your metabolism and your immune system's compromised, then you're going to react differently, because the virus is not what hurts you. Your own immune system's reaction to that virus is what kills you. That's what the cytokine storm is. That is your own immune system filling your lungs up with white blood cells and lymphatic fluid and inflammation to try to heal it, right? So if you can do things as simple as getting sunlight, taking vitamin A, D, and C to protect and downregulate the hypervigilance of the immune system, because it has the tools it needs, it's going to go, oh yeah, there's a coronavirus. Okay, for sure. Yeah, just go ahead and send some macrophages over there, eat it up, and yeah, just don't worry about it too much. You might cough a little bit, may have low energy, but we'll be good, right? So, vitamin A, C, and D is great. Vitamin B is really good if you already have the coronavirus. So A and D is more prevention, and vitamin B and C is more after you've already had it, because B and C is what's actually going to block those cytokines, those inflammatory cytokines, to binding to the tissues in your heart and your lungs. So if it's already in you, definitely hit it with B and C. You still want to do A and D. If you feel good and you want to keep feeling good, I would do A, C, and D together. If you want the specifics on this, you can hit me up or check out some of the work by Dr. Shiva, Shiva. And if the political and economic component of this is polarizing for you, just tune any part of that out that you don't like, and just look at the amazing science that this PhD MIT genius who invented email when he was 14 has been putting out there. And it's pretty damn profound. So if you want to learn more, I would definitely check out Dr. Shiva. You can hit me up. I'm still doing Zoom calls and stuff too, if people want like answers and little suggestions for these things. But that's something that at least gives me a sense of security and safety, so I have enough courage and I'm willing to be vulnerable enough to actually open the doorway of communication to the experience that we're having and interacting with it in a way that is not fear-based.
And that's really what we're wanting to focus on at Unity, is being a participant in life, a responder to life. We cannot be a participant and we cannot respond to the conditions around us if we are in that fear-based mindset, because that will just strangle us. So it's good to know this. And I love that you say that we can do this in little increments. Right? We don't have to just suddenly feel like all happy and excited. We can just do it little baby steps.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah.
Taylor, why don't you share your website address with us?
Yeah, so you can just Google 0 Point Athletics, and there's a link to the website there. You can read all the different reviews that have been left there. It's always makes me happy reading those, because they're just really positive, and it's awesome to hear that.
Oh yeah.
If you want to keep up with what we're doing, Instagram's probably the best place, at 0 Point Athletics. We also have an exclusive Facebook group that you're able to join, where you can get live workouts, 3 to 5 live workouts depending on the day, including working yin, which is one of those things that can really help you get out of that fear and get back to that 0 point state. That's mostly what Deanna did when she was coming to the gym for the first couple months. So you can join the Facebook group. You can email us at 0pointathletics@gmail.com, and my phone number is 909-810-7973. You can text me. Please don't call me, because I'm doing Zooms and lives and stuff all the time, but you can text me. We could set something up, and I'd love to share more with you guys, because this is something that could be a 4 or 5 hour long podcast in reality. So
oh yeah. All right, thank you so much, Taylor, for all this information. It was wonderful, and it was amazing, as usual, getting to chat with you.
awesome.
Thank
you so much.
All right, Adam, you can stop the live feed now on our Facebook group.
Bye,
Thanks,
guys.
everybody. Bye.
Thanks for listening.